We have already touched upon the fact that artificial intelligence takes upon this bias which are inherent in their designers. If we rely on AI thoughtlessly, we only enhance them. It is clear to combat climate change, to overcome the problems of the modern world, I would like to give the floor to Hanan Salam, the founder of Women in AI. You have the floor.
Ханан, добрый день. Расскажите, пожалуйста, какие именно ошибки наследуют сейчас?
Good afternoon, Hanan. Please, can you tell us about the biases of artificial intelligence that are inherent to the nature of their creators?
Should I start?
Да, мы уже слушаем внимательно вас.
Yes, we're listening to you carefully.
Hello everyone. I'm Hanan Salam. I'm a professor and researcher in AI at the New York University of Abu Dhabi. As also she mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Women in AI, an international nonprofit whose aim is to increase the participation and representation of women in the field of artificial intelligence. So in this keynote, I will be talking to you about some of the opportunities AI can present for sustainability and solving ESG problems, in particular bias in artificial intelligence and how it can present various risks related to ESG problems. So, as you know, the three elements that underpin ESG reporting outcomes include environmental sustainability, which addresses the climate crisis, for example, reductions in electricity, water, carbon usage, and the company's environmental management systems. Social responsibility, which focuses on concerns related to diversity and inclusion, human rights, consumer protection, and employees' well-being. And finally, corporate governance, focusing on concerns related to business ethics, compliance, management structure, and employees and executive relations and compensation. So in each of these areas, AI presents a vast amount of opportunities, allowing companies to address some of these ESG concerns. For instance, some of the examples of how AI can be used to solve problems related to environmental sustainability include AI-infused clean distributed energy grids, precision agriculture, sustainable supply chains, and even environmental monitoring and enforcement, for example, enhanced weather and disaster prediction and response. So AI-based systems can also be applied in order to increase gender equality, from issues of violence against women, where AI can be used, for example, to analyze local risk zones and warn victims, to solving issues of uneven funding for women, for example, using text analysis to analyze the vocabulary used by men and also make recommendations to women entrepreneurs, to reducing inequalities in the health sector and also the pay gap. AI-based technology can also be used to better inform ESG investors as well. For instance, instead of relying only on company disclosed information, AI can be used to filter, extract, and analyze essential data that investors currently are lacking, which would make AI as a catalyzer for sustainable investing at a larger scale. For example, using opinion mining and sentiment analysis, AI would be able to predict whether a company is ESG compliant or not. So how does this work? This works first by using AI to search for and to extract the company's data from various sources that can be online. This includes news, social media that mentions the company, as well as the company's disclosures and internal or even external reports. Then after this, AI can be used to automatically organize this data by parsing and converting the huge volumes of the extracted unstructured data into structured data. And finally, using AI predictions to discover valuable insights using various techniques such as natural language processing, to capture sentiment, context, and even semantic factors which would be embedded in the collected data and consequently better informing ESG investors. Now, while AI has a great potential for solving ESG concerns and sustainability, of which I did not, of course, mention everything, but it is not without fault. Because AI models are built based on data that can contain certain biases, the decisions made by the AI systems can learn these biases, which, in my opinion, would present one of the biggest risks for ESG. And the way I see it is the effect of such potential biased algorithms on ESG-related aspects can be summarized in three folds. First, ESG data and ratings can be biased. And so if we use this data to train AI models on such data, we will learn, the algorithms will learn these biases. And such bias can come from the fact that the majority of information that come from company-reported data, the company's marketing and content strategy as well, can play a role in this bias. For example, a company which uses positive wording or green colors to appear more sustainable than they are really. An example of this is the company called Shell, which is a multinational oil and gas company, which was accused of using the word sustainable in their mission statement and even website, as you see in this image, while providing very, very little evidence to support that it is really, it's sustainability, it's taking sustainability measures. So even if AI is used to search the web and analyze the data for ESG scoring, there is a very big potential that the bias will propagate and the decisions will be biased as well. Other sources of bias that can affect AI decisions for ESG scoring is the company size. Where it was found that larger companies received higher ratings, probably due to the budget that they allocate either for greenwashing or sustainability, if they are really working towards that. Geographical bias is also another source due to the fact that regulations for reporting requirements might vary from one region to another. For example, European companies are often received much higher ESG ratings than their peers in the USA or even in the other parts of the world. The second risk of AI for ESG concerns actually the propagation of inherent biases and stereotypes that exist in the society through AI algorithms, which can hamper the achievement of one of the ESG goals, which is diversity and inclusion. For example, and here are some of the examples of the many examples that of bias in AI algorithm. It was found that AI algorithms used in the US courts to measure defendants' likelihood of recidivism were more likely to label Black defendants as high risk compared to white defendants from similar backgrounds. On the other hand, research from the university, Carnegie Mellon University, has shown that in certain settings, Google online ads for jobs paying more than $200,000 were actually shown to significantly fewer women than men, resulting in less women applying for such jobs because they were not shown these ads. Another example that concerns algorithms learning sexist stereotypes is in machine translation. And this is probably the most famous example of bias in AI that you can find. This screenshot is actually from today, translating gender-neutral professions from English to Spanish. And showing that, for example, the nurse profession is associated with a female in Spanish, while the doctor profession is associated with a male, even though if in English we are using the, which is gender neutral. Now, I'm not sure if such bias also exists when translating to Russian, because I don't speak Russian, so I don't know, maybe you can tell me. But till now, this haven't been fixed for all languages, which I feel is a bit, not so good for this company. This is another example showing the CEO auto-suggest from an iPhone, which associates a CEO to a man's emoticon, showing also, again, how some stereotypes can be, transferred in recommendation systems. And I'm not sure if you are familiar with Tay, which is Microsoft's Twitter-based bot that some years ago turned into a racist monster after learning through interaction from his Twitter followers. So what Tay has taught us is not only that AI systems will learn the biases from the data that is fed to it, but also the importance of foreseeing such problems and tackling them before they are, out there used by millions of users. And I'm not sure if you have noticed, probably most of you have, it's a very hot topic as well, that the content that is shown to us in our timeline is skewed towards what we have already liked before, which is okay because personalization can actually increase revenues, but on the other hand, it can lead to excluding other information that might be of interest to the person, and this emerges with time according to what a person would like each time on Facebook, creating a sort of emergent bubbles, and this is what we call emergent bias. And the danger of such biases, of emergent biases, is that it might allow to manipulate us and our opinions to choosing one thing over the other. Rumors say that, for example, Trump was only elected because of what Facebook was showing to people during the election campaigns. Stereotype propagation in AI systems can also happen by design. For example, if you look at virtual assistants, you can see that those that are tasked with addressing simple questions, for example, Apple's Siri or Amazon's Alexa, have female voices, while more sophisticated problem-solving assistants such as IBM Watson or Microsoft Einstein have male voices. And all of these examples give an idea of how biased data can amplify and transfer human biases in a way that can affect the lives of humans to a big extent, and also hamper reaching the diversity and inclusion goals of the ESG. So if we don't take significant actions, we are at the risk of constructing machine intelligence that would mirror a narrow and privileged vision of the society with its old familiar biases and stereotypes. So what should we do? Fighting bias in algorithms and systems is possible, but it is also challenging at the same time. It can be fighted from two fronts, from the algorithm and from the design point of view. For example, as I have already said, several of the biases in the decisions made by AI algorithms come from the data it is trained on. So the first thing to do is to check if the data contains bias, check the data for discrimination before using them to train the models. And if the data sets we are using are clean, bias-free, and diverse, then we have a less chance in obtaining biased decisions from AI algorithms. And there are some statistical tools that exist that can be used to assess if the data at hand is fair or not. The data can be processed afterwards to eliminate the bias. Another source that might cause a bias is how the model works to classify examples. For example, methods for adjusting machine learning process, such that the outputs would obey selected fairness constraints can be an option. And here we speak of explainable AI. There are different frameworks that assess the model bias and related fairness, which were developed and can be used, and most of them are open source, such as LIME, FairML, SHAP, Google's What If, and IBM Bias Assessment Toolkit. This is, for example, an example of LIME that tries to look at what are the words that were the most determinant in classifying a person's religion, and thus trying to explain the decisions that were performed by the AI or machine learning black box to do the decision to classify if a person, what is the religion of the person. I would like to also point out that it is very important to assure the maturity of the AI products before using the algorithms for real-world applications. For example, if Google have tested the image recognition on, there is an image recognition to recognize people. So if Google have tested this image recognition on Black people and saw that it is detecting them as gorillas, it would have corrected it before it made all of this noise. Also, Google Translate, because of all of these examples, we can implement some very simple rules and design methods to actually correct the biases that we see in Google Translate, for example. And in the long term, many companies will need to actually create a position for bias detection and algorithm analysis to ensure that their AI is as bias-free as possible. And last but not least, other than looking at the data and at the models, an important way in fighting bias is actually design. Just like we design for user experience, AI companies can design for ethics, bias, and stereotype freedom in systems. And this can be done first by defining who are the end users are and asking for their opinions, and second by asking what are the ethical considerations embedded in this design. This is an example that justifies the need for an ethical design. For example, when testing Siri, Alexa, Cortana, and Google Home, a response to sexual harassment, it was found that Siri and Alexa respond in a grateful or a flirtatious way, while Cortana and Google Home reply by jokes to sexual harassment. And this is clearly an evidence of a design problem. The exact gender breakdown of the developers or designers behind these bots is unknown, but it is certain that the majority are men. So the chance that male bot developers have manually programmed these bots to respond to sexual harassment with jokes is very high. And this raises the necessity of an ethical design. And this cannot happen without, of course, a diverse team. Because when the teams creating AI models, developing data sets, and designing the systems are diverse, the algorithms they produce are more likely to be fit for a bias-free world. And this actually presents an opportunity for AI companies to score high on ESG ratings related to social responsibility and diversity. Finally, the third risk that tech firms can face due to bias related to ESG is their ESG reputation risk. If the companies like Google, for example, or Microsoft continue to design algorithms with built-in biases or biased design choices, like in the examples that we have just seen, they will be affecting their ESG reputation, and no greenwashing can ever wash this. To end this talk, I would like also to point out that even if the risks of using AI for solving ESG problems are mitigated, one barrier that is worthy looking at is the potential negative influence of AI itself on sustainability, because AI takes enormous amounts of computing power and hence energy. And so one has to wonder if AI is the next climate change threat. So these are, it might not be, and because of the advances, this might not happen, but it is very important to address all this topic from all of its angles, because yes, AI has great potential, but also there are some risks and barriers that are associated to it. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Hanan, thank you very much. It was a very interesting and a little bit scary presentation. How can a company understand that their data sets, their databases have biases in them, that they have this? How do you check this? What kind of criteria do you use, and who should do this? And should you do this one-time review, or should this be on a regular basis?
I'm sorry, were you asking me or?
Ханан, давайте я еще раз повторю вопрос. Кто и как должен следить за тем, чтобы...
Hanan, so once again, who should take into account, who should review all these accounts so that all these algorithms should work properly and to avoid getting these biases? Maybe somebody should monitor for these biases. Should we do this one time? Should we do this on a regular basis?
Yes, as I have said, actually, like it is very important to tackle the problem from its root. So I've mentioned this in my presentation. So we can actually check if the data that we are using to train the models are biased, and try to clean the data from any kind of existing bias. And we can try also to explain the model, try to understand how the AI algorithm is actually giving this decision based on what kind of features from the data. And we can also, governments can also put some regulations about how, what are the design issues that we need to take into account in order for our product, AI product or system, not to be, present any kind of stereotypes. So there are different things that we need to do, whether from the design perspective, but also from the research and the algorithm perspective.
Ханан, спасибо
And
большое.
companies can also, of course, I think companies can also have like committees and people responsible for this aspect in their board or in their company from their employees. So,
Ханан, спасибо вам большое за то, что...
Hannah, thank you very much for joining us today. It was very interesting listening to you. Thank you very much. So let us thank all our speakers. Humanity has great technologies in possession which we can use to do good both for business and for the planet. We've learned that corporations now use venture funds approach working for ESG funds, and startups have new windows of opportunities. And we also have come to realize that AI can help in all these options, but it must avoid the biases of their designers. We hope that the ideas which will be reborn into new, inspiring projects. A very interesting idea was spoken by Torvalds Linus, the creator of Linux Core. The technologies do not lead anywhere. Society changes technologies, not vice versa. Technologies just outline the boundaries of what and how cheap we can do. I think this day demonstrated that we as a society go the right way. And we have technologies behind us. Julia Makarova, your host for Green Transition. Thank you for being our audience, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.